spooky friends. Thanks for spending your Friday with us, or whatever day it is that you're listening. There's nothing better than finding a way to connect with fellow true crime-loving weirdos, and that's precisely why we created our own true crime cult.
But not to worry, you've landed in the cult with all of the baby goats and none of the brainwashing. Grab a flower crown, find a seat around the campfire, and settle in for another story on the subject that unites us together, murder.
In case you're just finding us for the first time today, allow us to introduce ourselves. I'm Angelina, and I'm here with my peculiar pal, Aurora.
Oh, hey, friend.
Hey, friend. How's your week going?
It's good. I just got back from a quick trip to Vancouver Island, my first time going, and there was a little true crime tie-in to my trip.
Uh-oh, what happened?
So this is interesting. We were driving between this like little hiking area. I think it's like Juan Fuca Park or something like that. And on our way up to the city of Duncan. And along the freeway there, we saw this memorial that was like justice for, I believe it's Derek and Janelle. And so like there was like a sign that said that, and then like looking up the hill, there was like this memorial that was built, and there's like photos of them and other people and a staircase and flowers. There's even like a I don't want to call it an outhouse because it was nicer than that, like this like toilet that they built that's like made from wood, and like they have like baby wipes and like more pictures, and like it's a very clean, like nice bathroom because the family spends so much time at this memorial. They're like, well, we need a bathroom too.
Yeah, otherwise we have to leave too early all the time.
Yeah. So I tried to do a little bit of research, and I haven't gotten a ton of answers yet, but it looks like the family lost two sons within 3 years of each other. So like a 20-year-old and like probably like close to a 20-year-old son, like 3 years apart. And one was in a motor vehicle accident, it sounds like. So I'm not sure if it was like anything nefarious, if it was a hit and run or just an accident. But the other son was stabbed to death in his father's home, and his girlfriend was there at the time and was stabbed and left for dead, and fortunately survived.
Holy.
Just terrible. But like also they had like other photos. I don't know if it's like friends of theirs who have like died in the community, like also around the same age. And so I don't know if there's another, like one of them died in a violent crime, and then another was in a motor vehicle accident as well. But I really want to look more into like what is the connection of all their stories. And I see that the trial for the man that stabbed the one son, who I believe is Derek, that he is going through trial right now. And the girlfriend who was stabbed 5 times and has had like many surgeries and still isn't through the healing process, even though this happened in 2016. His trial is going on right now, and I believe his sentencing is coming up.
Oh my God, that sounds intense. How rough for that family to have those two sons go through that with their two sons, and then also lose, friends, or I guess connect with people who lost people. And
at such young ages too, just awful, and within such a short time between it. So terrible. But if anybody is aware of this, I know we have a lot of Canadian listeners and we have a lot of BC listeners, like definitely write in and let us know if there's more to this story from what I'm able to dig up online, because I'm quite curious about it.
Yeah, I feel like there's lots of stuff that goes on around there that slips under the radar for a long while that could be connected to other things. So the regular process seems to be like, wow, a lot unfolds like way after the fact. So like, I wouldn't be surprised to see that again.
Exactly. So we'll be keeping an eye out, but let us know what you know.
Yeah.
Well, just because you tune into our show every week, we like to think of you as honorary monsters. But if you want to make it official, you can join the MMN commune on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/MurderMurder.news to sign up. And in return, we'll give you a shout out on the show, name one of our baby goats in your honor, and of course, you'll have exclusive access to our regular patron-only content.
We'll be right back after a quick commercial break from one of our fellow Darkcast podcasts.
Hello, Spooklings.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Kathy.
And we're the hosts of the weekly podcast, All Hallows Eve Podcast.
We are a husband and wife duo with a passion for anything spooky, macabre, and true crime, sprinkled with our own twist of comedy.
We explore topics such as the history of Halloween, the Butcher of Plainfield, Hocus Pocus 2, urban legends, superstitions, and more.
So come join us as we go down the rabbit hole that is All Hallows Eve Podcast.
Listen and follow us at allhallowsevepodcast.com or your favorite podcast provider.
Stay spooky, my friends.
And we're back. Before we dig in, we want to offer a quick disclaimer. Though we joke about forming a true crime cult, that is not to diminish the severity of actual cult activity, and we want you to know that we take the cases we're discussing very seriously.
We want to deliver each story with the utmost respect to victims and anyone involved. If you feel we've missed the mark, you don't like our tone, or if you notice we've gotten any details wrong, let us know with a quick email to MurderMurder.news@gmail.com and we'll make it right.
Some specific trigger warnings for this episode include blunt force trauma and gun violence. If either of those subjects are particularly sensitive for you, you may want to skip this one and listen to one of our other episodes instead.
25 years ago today, the killers of 16-year-old Adrianne Jessica Jones were finally brought to justice when they were convicted of her murder on February 17th, 1998. Adrianne, who went by AJ, was a popular, outgoing, athletic sophomore found brutally murdered in a field in Mansfield, Texas in the early morning hours of December 4th, 1995. The community grieved the loss of the bright, spirited student, wondering who could have wanted to harm her. It's possible you've heard this case before, now nicknamed the Texas Cadet murders, but Adrianne's murder is pretty much always told through the lens of her killers, often barely mentioning her life and sometimes including cringeworthy victim blaming. Today we're going to tell Adrianne's story. Our sources for today include a great article in Texas Monthly, The Cadet Murder Case, a true story of teen love and deadly revenge by A.W. Gray, Cinnaholic, Snapped Killer Couples, and more. For a full list of sources, check out our show notes.
Adrianne Jessica Jones was born on June 18, 1979, in Dallas, Texas. When she was 5 years old, her parents, Bill and Linda, moved her and her two younger brothers to a nearby suburb, Mansfield, Texas, in search of a safer, more close-knit community. Mansfield boasted an indoor rodeo, a downtown with charming antique shops, plenty of parks, and a population of around 10,000 people when the Joneses moved to the small town in 1985. Bill Jones worked repairing heavy construction equipment. He had an hour commute to work each day, so his family could grow up in the safety of the suburbs. He was known for his no-nonsense approach to life that included keeping a tight rein on his children. Adrianne, being the oldest, had it pretty tough. She had a curfew of 9 p.m., even on the weekends, right up until she turned 16, which was also the first time her parents let her go out on dates. The windows in her room had been nailed shut to make sure she couldn't sneak out. If she went someplace like Six Flags or to see a movie, her dad would make her produce her ticket to prove she had actually been where she said she was. Bill later said of his parenting style, quote, "I truly felt that if we had some rules that kept her away from teenage temptations, we'd be okay."
Her mom, Linda, worked as a massage therapist at a hair salon and, like her daughter, was very chatty and social. Money was tight at home, so Adrianne worked 20 hours a week at a local fast food restaurant, Golden Fried Chicken, near Mansfield's town center. She saved the money she made in a red metal box she kept in her room, and it was her dream to use that money to help pay for college. At work, her liveliness and energy showed through. She was so likable. Coworkers remember her enthusiasm for doing the moonwalk, lending an eager ear to anyone in distress, and sometimes blowing spitballs at friends through a straw. Her manager, Tina, said she was sometimes a handful to manage because the young extrovert was easily distracted with conversations with coworkers and talking on the phone to friends, but the pretty blonde also brought in customers. In hindsight, we're assuming some of those customers were well over the age of 16, so this is definitely creepy, but Adrianne was cute and bubbly and had plenty of admirers. She was so good with customers that Tina promoted her to the drive-through cashier. She drew a smiley face on the visor of her hat and loved joking with the people in her line. She put a smile on everyone's face.
Aside from being a hardworking social butterfly, she was also a good student. She took honors classes. She was full of school spirit, and many assumed she was on her way to being a cheerleader. She was athletic and had played team sports, including soccer, since the 7th grade. After injuring her knee playing soccer, she took up running to try and build strength to avoid further injuries. She could often be seen jogging around town on her way to school or work. She joined the cross-country team and got so good at the 2-mile run that she helped her school qualify for an upcoming regional meet. Always friendly and outgoing, friends said she would say hi to people in the hallway even if she didn't know them. She was just like that. One of her best friends, Tracy, called her a big flirt, and her friend Sydney said a lot of guys at their school had crushes on her. She liked the attention, and her mom, Linda, said she would often spend hours in her room putting on makeup. Linda said, quote, "When I asked her why she went to such trouble to put her makeup on before she went out of the house, she said, 'Mom, you never know who you might meet.'"
On December 3rd, 1995, a Sunday, Adrian was at work at Golden Fried Chicken. Weather in Central Texas in December can be pretty unpredictable, but that Sunday was beautiful. It was 70 degrees or 21 degrees Celsius with blue skies. Work was slow. There was a Cowboys game that day, and Texans take football very seriously. Some have described Mansfield as turning into a ghost town as many head to the stadium or a bar to watch the game. Golden Fried Chicken was not a place to watch, so things were pretty dead that day. The kitchen crew had a small portable TV to watch the game, and Adrian occasionally asked what the score was. Football wasn't really her thing, but she liked to be in the know nonetheless. Since it was such a slow day, she spent most of her time on the phone, leaving her friend on the line when she would occasionally bring up a customer. Coworkers got the idea she may have been making plans for later that night. While Bill Jones was strict with Adrian and her curfew, some of her closest friends have suggested she did occasionally sneak out of her home late at night to meet up and party. Typical teenager stuff. Allegedly, Bill caught on to her late-night adventures, and that was when he nailed her window closed. A little nail in the window was not about to stop a 16-year-old, so she found ways around it.
She got off work that evening around 7 and got a ride home with one of the delivery drivers. Linda had spent the afternoon painting the kitchen, but when her daughter got home from work and asked if they could go to the gym together, she couldn't say no to quality time with her oldest child. The two headed to the gym, with Adrian lifting weights and using a stair climber. Her mother remembers remarking how she always seemed to have endless energy. They had a fruit drink together and headed home around 10 p.m. On the way home, the two talked about Adrian's future and what she wanted to do after college. She talked to her mom about maybe being a psychologist or counselor. She was a good listener, and this path seemed like a good fit for her.
Not long after they got home, the phone rang. Adrian had recently started dating 19-year-old Tracy Smith, a bodybuilder from the gym where she worked out. She was expecting a call from him that night. As part of her curfew, she was not allowed to talk on the phone after 10 p.m., but her mom, Linda, made an exception that evening because Tracy had been out of town with his parents. He wouldn't be able to call her until 10:30 p.m., so Linda let it slide, but said they could only talk for a few minutes. While the two were chatting, Linda heard Adrian say, "Hold on, there's someone on the other line." It was past her curfew, so Linda made a mental note to inquire about the second call later. When asked who had called, Adrian responded, "Oh, that was David from cross country. He's upset about something."
Around 10:45 p.m., Adrian was up ironing her pants for school the next day. Linda could tell her daughter seemed anxious about something and told her to go to bed. Adrian headed to her room, which she had decorated with Pearl Jam and Annie Lennox posters. Around midnight, Adrian's brother heard the rumble of a car engine moving slowly in front of their house. He looked out the window and saw a truck pulling away. The next morning, the Jones family got up and got ready for work and school. Adrian wasn't in her room, but she often went for early morning runs. But something didn't seem right to Linda. When she peeked in Adrian's room, she noticed her bed was made. Adrian was not known for being tidy, and Linda usually made her bed. But on this morning, it appeared to still be made from the day before. Then she realized Adrian's running shoes were in her room. She couldn't have left without them.
At 8 a.m., she called the high school to see if Adrian had somehow just gone in early. She hadn't shown up for her first period class. At 8:09, Linda called the police to report Adrian missing. Not long before Linda noticed Adrian's disappearance, a farmer, Gary Foster, found something disturbing. He was on Seaton Road along Joe Pool Lake in nearby Grand Prairie. He had stopped to get his mail when he noticed a fence had been left open on his property. He stopped to investigate it, and as he walked towards the gate, he noticed a piece of cloth fluttering in the wind and what he first believed to be roadkill. As his eyes focused, he realized it was a human body. It was a teenage girl. She wore blue and green plaid flannel shorts, a white shirt, and white socks with no shoes. Her arms were by her side. Gary raced home and told his wife to call 911. The girl had been badly beaten. The left side of her skull had caved in from the attack. She had been shot once through the forehead and once through the left cheek. There was no sign of a struggle. There were no defensive wounds or any sign she had been restrained. She had not been sexually assaulted. The shirt she wore was from a cross-country meet. Between the cross-country shirt and the missing person report filed by Linda, Adrian was identified within hours.
With her level of popularity, rumors started flying around immediately. Who could have killed her? Everyone had a theory, and no one felt safe. Did the killer attend their high school? Some said she had been known to sneak out of the house to attend all-night raves, and maybe someone from the parties had killed her. Some said she had been doing drugs, and maybe she owed a dealer money. Some even speculated that this had been an alien abduction. None of this was helpful to authorities or Adrian's family, and it felt like her character was under attack. Police wasted no time talking to all of the students at Mansfield High. Rumors were there was someone that may have wanted Adrian dead. Almost 2 years before, one of her closest friends, Kimberly, had an affair with a girl named Lindsay's boyfriend. Lindsay found out about it and made a plan to get revenge. She had her boyfriend call Kimberly to sneak out with him one night. Lindsay hid in the back of his truck. When Kimberly came out, Lindsay attacked her with a baseball bat. She broke her jaw and knocked out some of her teeth. She later had to have plastic surgery. Adrian testified in court against Lindsay, and Lindsay ultimately got probation and was expelled from school. Lindsay had allegedly never forgiven Adrian and wanted to get revenge against her as well. The attack also seemed to match Kimberly's assault. Adrian had potentially received a phone call from a mystery caller that night, and it appeared she had snuck out of the house in the early hours of December 4th. Her brother had seen a truck pulling away from the house. Could Lindsay have been hiding in the back of that truck as well? Adrian had blunt force trauma to her head, just like Kimberly.
Lindsay was brought in for questioning and a polygraph test. She passed the polygraph and ended up having a solid alibi. She was cleared by police. Linda and Bill didn't like their daughter dating Tracy Smith. He was older than their daughter, and they were already so protective of her. According to Adrian, Tracy had been out of town with his parents, but had that been a farce? He was the last person to talk to Adrian that night. Had they come up with a lie together so they could secretly meet up? Tracy had not been lying about being out of town and also passed a polygraph. He did remember that Adrian had taken a phone call during their chat on the 3rd, and when she came back on the phone, he said a friend, Brian, had called her because he was depressed and needed someone to talk to. Her mention of Brian calling was different than the story she had told her mom. Her mom had been told David from the cross-country team had called. But Tracy wasn't the only person to mention the name Brian in the investigation. Brian McMillan worked at Eckert's Pharmacy near a Subway shop where Adrian used to work.
Brian was a high school dropout and was known to be infatuated with her. He would come see her at Subway all the time, and she would hide from him and have coworkers wait on him instead because it was freaking her out. He was brought in for questioning and denied even knowing Adrian at first. After admitting he did know her, police then asked him if he had called her house the night she disappeared. He said he wouldn't remember it if he did because he had been so depressed that night that he drank alcohol until he blacked out. He told police he had initially been depressed because all of his friends had girlfriends and he didn't. When pressed, he admitted that it was possible he had called her. It was possible that he drove to her house. It was possible that he had met up with her. He just couldn't remember. Police pressured him to take a polygraph, but after speaking with his parents, he refused. This was a strike against Brian for the investigators. The next strike against him was that he also drove a truck, and Adrian's brother had seen a truck in front of their house the night of the murder.
On December 15th, Brian was arrested. They arrived at his house with a search warrant for his home and truck, and in early January, he agreed to a polygraph. Surprisingly, he passed, with flying colors even, and was released. This, of course, angered the community who thought the police had gotten their man. True crime enthusiasts all know polygraphs are not reliable and can be faked, and many worried Adrian's killer was now on the loose. Yet investigators were unable to find any evidence Adrian had ever been in Brian's truck, and there was no evidence tying him to the murder scene. And with that, police had no other viable leads. Adrian's case just sat open. That is until August 29th, 1996. Police in Grand Prairie received a phone call out of the blue. The call was from a naval officer at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. The officer asked if they had an unsolved murder case involving a teenager. According to the naval officer, he had a disturbing conversation with two female cadets. They told him that one of their roommates, a young midshipman, had bragged to them that her boyfriend loved her so much that he had killed for her. The cadets were disturbed by this admission and reported their roommate to the officer. The girl was from Grand Prairie, Texas, and the officer wanted to first investigate whether or not there had been an unsolved murder in the area to see if he should take the claim seriously.
The cadet in question was 18-year-old Diane Zamora, a freshman at the Naval Academy. Like Adrian, Diane was also the oldest sibling in a tight-knit family. But beyond that, the two girls had vastly different lives. Diane's father had struggled to keep a job, which made her determined to be a success. At the age of 9, she announced to her family that she was going to be an astronaut. From that point on, she was determined to make that dream a reality, and she wasn't going to let anything get in her way. She was a straight-A student, was a member of the Student Council, Key Club, National Honor Society, and Masters of the Universe, a science club. She played the flute and ran cross-country. Everything she did was with purpose, working towards her goal. But as a teenager, life got hard for Diane and her family when her mother discovered her father had been having an affair. Their family fell apart. This made it very hard for her to trust men, and she decided to avoid dating altogether. She was not going to let a bad relationship stand in the way of her dreams.
Diane was uninterested in dating or parties. Her entire focus was on her academic career and her future. Her plan was to attend the prestigious Naval Academy, and once she was a naval aviator, she would apply for astronaut training. One step to achieving that goal was to join the Civil Air Patrol while in high school, which is similar to an ROTC program. She believed this was her opportunity to get noticed for her application to the Naval Academy. It's there where she met fellow student, 17-year-old David Graham. David was tall and handsome and equally as focused and motivated as Diane. He was an ROTC commander and student at Mansfield High. He also happened to be a David from cross country that you may recall from earlier in the story. David planned on attending the Air Force Academy, and the two quickly realized that with their ambitious goals, they could make a real power couple, and they had an intense summer romance.
6 weeks after they met, they announced to their families that they were engaged while in high school. They were planning on acting responsibly, though. They would wait to get married in 5 years after they both graduated. After the summer ended and the two went back to their respective high schools 18 miles away, Diane at Crowley High School and David at Mansfield High, it put a strain on their relationship. But the two were determined to stay together and felt there was nothing they couldn't accomplish together. After graduating from high school, in the tops of their classes, everything was on track for the young couple. Diane was accepted into the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, and David left for the Air Force Academy near Colorado Springs, Colorado. One evening in August, Diane was bonding as a new cadet with her 2 roommates. She was bragging about her handsome, athletic, motivated boyfriend and said he loved her so much that he had killed for her. Her roommates, shocked by this confession, pressed her for details. They couldn't believe what they were hearing and decided to report it to their superior officer.
After hearing from the officer from the Naval Academy, the officials in Grand Prairie who'd been sitting on Adrian's unsolved case jumped into action. Detectives flew out to Annapolis to question Diane. She acted embarrassed. She'd only told her roommates this made-up tale as a late-night spooky story. There was no truth behind it, and neither of them had anything to do with Adrian's death. The Navy took Diane's confession, or even fake murder confession, very seriously, and the cadet was immediately suspended from the academy. She was given a flight home to Dallas, but she instead headed to Colorado Springs to see David. When investigators learned she had not flown home and instead went to see her boyfriend, they decided to do the same. They interrogated David, expecting the two had lined up their stories to match after their visit together. Initially, he did stick to that story. He said Diane made up the lie to impress her roommates because she was adjusting to life away from home. She had just come to visit him because she was upset about being suspended from her dream school. But detectives brought in his commanding officer and revealed that they had spoken to a friend in Texas who had mentioned something about bloody clothing. His commanding officer told him it was his duty to tell the truth. David requested a word processor and proceeded to write a 4.5-page confession of the murder of Adrian Jones. Here's an abridged version of that letter.
It was November 4th, and I was giving a friend a ride home late one night after returning from a cross-country meet in Lubbock, Texas. Adrian surprised me by asking me to take some turns that I knew were out of the way. After being directed onto a dark path behind an old elementary school, I parked the car. The events that followed are not pleasing for me to relate, as they go completely against the moral background I've grown to appreciate. They were sexual activities, short-lived and hardly appreciated. I did willingly concede to the girl in these actions, but I knew they were wrong. Never before had I participated in anything so meaningless and painful. Painful, that is, because I was letting down the one person I had swore to be faithful to.
The month that followed was one of guilt and shame. I was always being told by Diane that our relationship was perfect and pure. The love we shared would never be broken. No one would never come between us. No one, that is, except the one girl that had stolen from us our purity. I could never hold anything from Diane, nor she from me. She knew in my eyes that something was wrong the moment I decided to confess. When I did tell her, I thought the very life in her had been torn away. She was angry, she was violent, and she was broken. For at least an hour, she screamed sobs that I wouldn't have thought possible. It wasn't just jealousy. For Diane, she had been betrayed, deceived, and forgotten all in the one meaningless instant in November. The purity that she held so dear had been tainted in that one unclean act. Diane had always held her virginity as one of her highest virtues. When we agreed to be married, she finally let her guard down long enough for our teenage hormones to kick in. When this precious relationship we had was damaged by my thoughtless actions, the only thing that could satisfy her womanly vengeance was the life of the one that had, for an instant, taken her place.
I regret it now, for never did I imagine the heartache it would cause my school, my friends, Adrian's family, or even my community. I guess I just shut it all out of my mind that instant when I convinced myself that Diane was even worth murder. After Diane gave me the ultimatum, I thought long and hard about how to carry out the crime. I was stupid, but I was in love. The plan was to call Adrian and convince her to come out to my car. That worked. The plan was to drive her out near Joe Pool Lake. That worked. The plan was to, and this was not easy for me to confess, break her young neck and sink her to the bottom of the lake with the weights that ended up being hit into her head. That didn't work. Diane was hidden in the back of the car. It was late, about 0:30 hours, 12:30 a.m., on the morning of December 4th, 1995. I realized too late that all those quick, painless snaps seen in the movies were just your usual Hollywood stunts. The quick and painless crime turned into something that basically scared the expletive out of Diane and I. We realized that it was either her or us, and Diane struck her in the back of the head with one of the weights while I held her.
I could see in Diane's eyes that she was confused and scared. She was first acting out of passionate rage, and now she was fighting from instinct. Adrian somehow crawled through the window and, to our horror, ran off. I was panicking and just grabbed the Makarov 9mm to follow. To our relief, at the time, she was too injured from the head wounds to go far. She ran into a nearby field and collapsed. I wanted to just jump in and drive off. We were both shaken and even surprised by the nature of our actions. Neither Diane nor myself were ever violent people. In that short instant, I knew I couldn't leave the key witness to our crime alive. I just pointed and shot. I was very confused and scared. I probably looked like the proverbial headless chicken running around the crime scene. I fired again and ran to the car. Diane and I drove off. The first things out of our mouths were, "I love you," followed by Diane's, "We shouldn't have done that, David." Well, nice time to tell me I just wanted it to be a dream. We took the quickest route to I-20, where we decided to head to a well-trusted friend's home. John Green did exactly as I suspected, allowed us through his window, the usual entrance place to his room, allowed us to clean up and collect our wits, and even loaned me a pair of shorts. My clothing had blood stains on them, and we disposed of them in a dumpster near Diane's house.
We then went back to Diane's house, where we cleaned out the car and went to sleep by the fire. The next day, we returned the weights to my house. Diane was in shock. I was just scared. Neither one of us knew why anymore. We had just done that. The following days at school were so mentally tough. They make my summer at the Air Force Academy look like a walk in the park. Never had I even imagined so much guilt. I saw Adrian's mother in the grocery stores. I read articles of how her family was coping in the papers. One thing in particular has haunted me constantly for the past 8 months. I read a quote from Linda Jones in which she said, "I hope that her killer is out there and he's just being eaten up with guilt." When I read that, I just wanted it to all go away. I wanted to be able to drive Adrian back home, to go to sleep, and to wake up on December 3rd, free to make my decisions all over again. Diane wanted to go back also. For weeks, her infatuation was with just being able to go back before September 26, when she wrecked my truck and injured her hand. She wanted to change that, and she wanted to keep me from going to Lubbock. Diane was constantly depressed from the guilt. She was also scared that I would be arrested. She used to worry herself sick in school over me and have to call me as soon as school was out to make sure I was okay. It didn't really matter, however, what any police or detectives found. What happened was over. Adrian was gone. I was responsible, and it wasn't going away.
David and Diane were arrested on September 6, 1996 for the murder of Adrian. Diane's confession matched David's, though both later recounted their confessions and attempted to state that they were just accomplices to the other's crime. Diane's trial began in February of 1998 with the prosecution claiming she was the mastermind behind Adrian's murder. A calendar in her room was found with the date December 4th circled. Next to that circle was written, Adrian, 1:38 a.m. Diane claimed the plan had not been her idea, but David had been controlling and abusive and had forced her into helping him. On February 17th, 1998, after more than 6 hours of deliberation over 2 days, Diane was found guilty of capital murder and was eligible for the death penalty. At the sentencing hearing, Adrian's mother, Linda, asked for leniency for Diane and asked that the death penalty be taken off the table. She was sentenced to life in prison and would be eligible for parole after 40 years.
David's trial began in July of 1998, and his defense team claimed he had only made his confession to protect Diane, and he had not even been there the night of the murder. But in a twist from the prosecution, 2 witnesses stepped forward, stating David had lied about driving Adrian home from a cross-country meet and having shared an intimate night with her. A fellow teammate, Wendy, and their cross-country coach, Leanne, both claimed that Wendy had actually driven Adrian home that night, and David had made the entire thing up to make Diane jealous. David was found guilty of capital murder on July 24th, 1998. The Jones family again asked that the death sentence be taken off the table, and David was sentenced to life in prison.
I find the witness testimony to be so interesting because, I do think that there's a chance that David had taken Adrian home and something happened. I think everybody sort of bought that story. And when you listen to podcasts, many missed this detail that there was this later witnesses claiming that. But the cross-country coach was so sure of it and so sure of the dates. And I'm did he just make this up to make her jealous, or were the dates confused? It's so fascinating.
If he made that up, it's extremely fucked up because
very manipulative.
With her reaction, instead of coming clean or trying to calm her down, he's just okay, we'll murder then.
Right.
Which is just what the fuck? Was that your plan to begin with? How close were you to being open to murdering someone?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because if he could have taken that back and just been look, I may have embellished some details. I have a crush on her or something. You could have changed the story, but having agreed to kill her just feels so much more manipulative. And while I absolutely believe that both of them belong in prison, it definitely changes the story a bit, how you perceive Diane.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they both obviously were pretty manipulative. Yeah. And when they were saying how both claimed to just be a pawn in the other's game kind of thing, it reminded me of the Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, who did the same thing for years. And it's just a specific kind of psychology, I guess, around that, which is just so bizarre. I'm surprised that they didn't call David in the first place because Adrian had said, oh, I just got off the phone with David and he was mad. Why did no one call David at that point? That seems really strange. But I guess if they had, they might not have implicated Diane.
So it's interesting because there is a little bit more to that story, which I didn't include in this for the reasoning being I wanted to include all the suspects, and I thought that it would be a little bit more engaging to tell the story without revealing too much about David initially, or everybody would know it was him. So let me come back to that now. That was a trick on my part. But actually, but Adrian's mom had actually kind of fixated on the detail about David from the beginning. And while she still thought that it was the 19-year-old boyfriend, until he was cleared for it, and that was kind of her theory, she had actually called the school the day Adrian went missing to talk to the cross-country coach to ask who David was, the same day that she went missing. And talked to the cross-country coach. They brought in David, and he's like, no, I didn't make a call that night or whatever. He was interviewed by the police. He did take a polygraph early on, and he was cleared, and they just thought it was a red herring. There was no reason to believe he was involved because they didn't know that there had been perhaps sexual history between them. He had a girlfriend. He was a very good student. He's in the ROTC. He's on this path where there's no reason to believe that he's lying. So he was questioned by the police and cleared very early on.
Wow. That's bizarre, but good thing that it all came back to him somehow.
Yeah. And, it is fascinating because it's hard to imagine them being tied to this by investigators if Diane would not have confessed to it. To her roommates, if she wouldn't have been bragging about it. I don't know that they ever would have been caught.
Yeah, and if her roommates would not have believed it, or who knows, there's so many things at play here that it's really interesting how it all worked out. Thank God.
Yeah, I'm glad she, was clearly living with some kind of guilt. I don't think this was just a brag. I think it's it was eating at her, and she needed to say it and process it. So I'm glad that there was some guilt associated with this, and that Adrian's family got answers as a result.
Yeah, and I'm impressed by Adrian's mom's compassion for the killers, because obviously it's really hard to feel that way when your child has been murdered. A lot of people feel a lot of complicated feelings, but you don't often see someone pushing to have the death penalty taken off the table in that scenario.
Agreed.
So that's nice to see.
I don't know that I could feel that way. I am not a proponent of the death penalty, but I do think having a loved one being murdered changes that for people, which I understand.
It just feels personal.
Change my mind about the death penalty, but I know in the case where my friend was murdered, that if he wouldn't have shot himself, I'm not sure how I would feel about him being alive. I just have a lot of hatred for him.
Yeah,
so,
totally.
so I understand. And I did find that to be, I was hoping to find more information from Linda, and I couldn't find an interview with her about that. It seems as though their family has remained kind of silent, which is totally fine. If you've had somebody close to you, like your daughter murdered, you don't have to talk to the media. You don't have to start a foundation. You don't have to like constantly
since it's, like,
talk
justice has
publicly
been
about
brought.
it. Yeah. But so I couldn't find I was hoping to find a quote from her about why she did that. I'm assuming it must just be so hard when you lose your teenage daughter to see 2 more teenagers being put to death, like,
That's true. That is true.
I can understand why that would be unsettling and you wouldn't want that on your hands.
Yeah, right. So what have you been watching this week?
The only thing true crimey that I watched was You.
Yeah.
Have you finished it yet?
I have not. I still have only watched the first episode, so I need to step it up. But I know you have a lot to say about it, and I'm excited to hear what you have in a light spoilery version.
Sure, and definitely do not watch my TikTok I made on it. I put the spoiler alert in it at the beginning, and I posted it so you wouldn't have to, because I wasn't sure if you'd finished it or not, because I definitely talk spoilers in that TikTok. If you all want to hear my opinion about what's going on, I have even another theory after I posted that, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody, so I won't get into it. I will just say that if you haven't started the new season of You, that I thought it was fantastic. It's not losing steam. Like, you feel like maybe they're running out of storyline with this guy having this formula of like falling in love with a woman, chasing her around, maybe killing her. Now they're dead. Now there's a new love interest. And that's not where this goes. Like, they take a very different approach to it, and it has like this great whodunit backdrop, which is so fun. And you get introduced to that, I think, maybe at the first episode or at least by the second episode. So it's not a spoiler, but it's great. And I cannot wait to talk to everybody about it. And I think that when the second part of the season is released on March 9th, Angelina and I have already discussed having a viewing party for Patreons.
Yes. Yeah. So if you're watching this and want to do that, keep an eye out for, we're going to probably make a poll, I guess, on when exactly to do it. So keep an eye out for that to share your free time. And we want to get as many of you on board as possible so that we can dig in and then just chat about it afterwards.
Absolutely. And feel free to send me a message so we can talk about it. Anyone that is watching it, because I don't know anybody who's watching it. Like, none of my friends except for you are into it.
I'll catch up.
Yeah. And like a friend of mine in Laos, but like for some reason it's not playing on Netflix in Laos. Like, it says it's not available until March.
That's rude.
I know. I assume Netflix like released everything that was owned by them to the entire world all at once, but I guess that's not the case.
I know that like it often comes to the US before Canada, and there's some totally random different dates there. Like, sometimes it's like a month later, sometimes it's like a long time. It's just like really weird. I always wonder how they arrange that, because we have the internet and we can kind of share these like pirated things with each other and chat about storylines and things like that. You think you could just release it all.
It's interesting. And like, I know they do that sometimes. It's like a licensing thing, like around the world. Like right now, they're getting ready to take Schitt's Creek off of Canada Netflix, which I am so upset about. Like, I'm watching it again. I was like, I have to get this all in. But usually with like things that they own the licensing for, their own shows, they're usually released at the same time.
You'd think they could have it on Netflix all around the world. Yeah. But
I guess that's not the case.
It is weird with the licensing stuff, because Netflix, I think, made that 90s show. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think so.
And then at that same time, they lost the rights to that 70s show, which went somewhere else.
Oh, weird.
So real strange. So people are like trying to rewatch it to like gear up or so whatever. And it's like, oh, it's not there.
Bummer.
But yeah.
Well, what are you watching?
Well, aside from that first episode of You, which it does look really good, by the way, and it's just super well done. So I'm excited for the rest of it. The only other thing I really have watched is I finally watched the whole first season of The White Lotus, which everyone has been talking about forever. And I have a few clients who have been really hooked on it. And I keep seeing late night shows where there's a guest, someone new and cool, and they'll be like, and this person's now on The White Lotus. And I'm like, okay, I guess. So like, it was great. It was really great. I didn't know what to expect at all, but it was exactly the kind of lunacy that I tune in for.
Yeah.
So very, very good. And of course, the first season is, Jennifer Coolidge is wonderful.
Yeah, she's great.
There's an evil dude. I don't even know what his name is, but I'm so in awe of he just really pulls off the bad partner and just the bad guy in the whole, everything he says is just gross and rubs you the wrong way, just with the tone, with the look on his face. And I'm it's amazing when people pull off those roles really efficiently, because you almost wouldn't want to do it because people are going to hate you. You run into people in the real world and they'll be like, ew, you're that guy.
People love being disliked.
Yeah.
Internet trolls.
Yeah. It's a fun outlet for being a jerk, I guess. If you ever have any jerky feelings that you want to get out, channel it into your acting as a jerk. But very good job there by the guy whose name I don't remember.
I don't know who it is. I haven't seen it in so long. I can't help.
I feel like I should really just look it up really quick so that I know.
Let's know. His
name is Jake Lacey.
Oh, I don't know who that is.
I don't know who that is. He was in A Friend of the Family, the dramatization of the Vanished in Plain Sight or whatever.
Oh, I did watch that, then I probably do know who he is. Is he the bad guy in that? Is he
looks, by the cover, it looks like he's the bad guy. Yeah. So
okay.
I guess that is his vibe, bad guy.
Oh, I guess he's just maybe watch out for that one. I don't know. Maybe he's a great guy.
Maybe
he just
he's
likes
great,
playing a creep.
But I hate his face now.
Yeah.
So sorry, Jake Lacey, but you're too effective as a bad guy. Yeah. And that's it, I guess.
Great. I like the first season. I think the second season is way better.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it really just hit all the notes for me.
Okay. I can't wait.
I was okay with the first season. I didn't quite love it, but the second season I just adore. I just could not stop thinking about it. So I can't wait to hear what you think about that.
Okay, good. I'm going to dig in ASAP. I'm going to first prioritize you so we can chat about that, and then dig into season 2. Well, I guess that's enough murder for this week. If you require just a little bit more murder, you can get your fill on the OG MurderMurder.news with the latest breaking true crime news all week long.
You can also find us on Instagram at MurderMurder.news, on Twitter at MurderNews, on TikTok at MurderMurder.news, and on Facebook just by searching for MurderMurder.news.
And while you're on Facebook, searching for MurderMurder.news, you will also see our group pop up. And that group is where you can join our virtual book club. We're still working on The Family Next Door by John Glatt, and we'll discuss it on Zoom Sunday, February 26th. We hope you can make it.
Real wild story so far.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Well, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Reviews help new fans find the show and let us know what you're enjoying most about Murder Murder News. You should also subscribe on your preferred podcast platform to make sure you never miss an episode.
Thanks for listening.
Bye, spooky friends.